Every nut explained in 14 minutes. The almond is not a nut, but the seed of a drupe fruit related to the peach. Cultivation began around 3000 BC in the eastern Mediterranean, where wild almonds carried a lethal dose of cyanide. A single genetic mutation in a domesticated tree halted this poison production, allowing the crop to spread along the Silk Road. By the 8th century, Charlemagne ordered almond trees planted on all imperial estates in France. In modern agriculture, the crop dictates global ecology. Every February, 85% of the world's commercial honeybee population is transported to California's Central Valley. Without this coordinated insect migration, the state's 1.3 million acres of almond orchards would yield no harvest. The entire global supply depends on the logistics of moving billions of stressed bees across interstate highways. The peanut grows underground, making it a legume rather than a true botanical nut. Native to South America, the plant was introduced to West Africa by Portuguese traders in the 16th century before arriving in North America via the transatlantic slave trade. Until the American Civil War, peanuts were considered fodder for livestock and the destitute. Union and Confederate soldiers, facing starvation, adopted the crop as a survival ration, which popularized the legume nationwide. In 1895, Dr. John Harvey Kellogg patented a process for creating peanut butter as a protein substitute for wealthy patients at his Battle Creek Sanitarium who lacked teeth. The product was marketed as a health food for the elite before industrialization made it a staple of the working-class lunchbox. The pistachio owes its global presence to the specific demands of royal courts. Archival tablets from ancient Mesopotamia indicate that the Queen of Sheba monopolized the region's pistachio harvest, declaring it an exclusively royal food and forbidding commoners from growing it. The shell naturally splits open when ripe, a trait the Chinese labeled the happy nut and the Iranians called the smiling nut. In 1979, the United States imposed economic sanctions on Iran following the hostage crisis, which crippled the dominant Iranian pistachio export market. This geopolitical shift allowed California growers to aggressively expand, turning the state into the world's leading producer. The red dye formerly used on imported pistachios was merely a marketing trick to hide blemishes caused by traditional harvesting methods. The cashew grows in a manner that seems like an evolutionary design error. The nut develops inside a kidney-shaped shell attached to the bottom of the cashew apple, a tropical fruit native to northeastern Brazil. Portuguese explorers brought the tree to India in the 1560s solely to control soil erosion on the coast of Goa. The shell contains an oily compound called anacardic acid, which is chemically identical to the active irritant in poison ivy. Processing cashews requires roasting them outdoors to burn off the toxin, a procedure that releases caustic smoke capable of blinding workers. Because of this labor-intensive and hazardous extraction process, cashews remained an expensive luxury item for Western consumers until mechanized shelling was invented in the 1960s. The cashew you eat has survived a chemical decontamination process. The walnut is the oldest known tree food consumed by humans, with archaeological evidence of its consumption dating back to 7000 BC in Persia. The Romans considered walnuts the food of the gods, naming them juglans regia, or Jupiter's royal acorn. In medieval Europe, the doctrine of signatures dictated that because a shelled walnut resembles a human brain, it must cure headaches and mental illness. The wood of the walnut tree became so valuable for making military rifle stocks during World War I that French authorities restricted the felling of these trees for any other purpose. Today, the green husks of harvested walnuts are utilized in industrial manufacturing to create permanent dark dyes for textiles and woodwork. The stains left on the fingers of walnut harvesters last for weeks because the chemical binds permanently to human skin. The macadamia nut is the only native Australian plant to become a major commercial food export. Indigenous Australians called the nut jindal. utilizing stones with specialized grooves to crack the incredibly dense shells, which require 300 pounds of pressure per square inch to open. In 1857, botanist Ferdinand von Mueller named the genus after his late friend, the Scottish-Australian scientist John Macadam. The tree was introduced to Hawaii in 1881 not for food, but as a windbreak for commercial sugarcane fields. It took until 1922 for the Hawaiian Macadamia Nut Company to develop a mechanical cracker that could breach the shell without destroying the kernel inside. Dogs find macadamias highly toxic, experiencing temporary hind leg paralysis if they consume even a single nut. The pecan is the only major tree nut native to North America, specifically the river valleys of the American South and northern Mexico. The word derives from the Algonquian term pecan, which referred to any nut requiring a stone to crack. Native American tribes used pecans as a primary source of fats during winter, pounding the meats into a milk-like liquid used to season venison and thicken cornmeal mush. Thomas Jefferson planted pecan trees at Monticello in 1775, receiving the saplings from George Washington, who grew them at Mount Vernon. Commercial cultivation did not succeed until 1846, when an enslaved gardener named Antoine, working at Louisiana's Oak Alley plantation, perfected a technique for grafting wild pecan trees onto cultivated stock. His specific method established the modern pecan industry. The Brazil nut defies industrial cultivation because its survival requires an intact, pristine rainforest ecosystem. The trees grow exclusively in the wild Amazon basin and can reach heights of 160 feet, living for up to 500 years. They rely on a single species of large orchid bee for pollination. These bees are attracted only by the scent of a specific orchid that grows on nearby jungle trees. The nuts develop inside a hard, wooden pod resembling a coconut, which weighs up to 5 pounds and falls from the canopy at speeds exceeding 50 miles per hour, occasionally killing unsuspecting foragers. Inside the pod, 10 to 25 individual nuts are packed tightly together like orange wedges. Due to their deep root systems, Brazil nut trees absorb radium from the soil, making the nuts naturally radioactive at levels 1,000 times higher than other foods. The hazelnut, or filbert, has been tied to European superstition and law since the Mesolithic era. Archaeological digs on the Scottish island of Colonsay uncovered a massive pit containing hundreds of thousands of charred hazelnut shells dating to 7000 BC, indicating large-scale prehistoric processing. The term filbert originates from St. Philibert's Day on August 22, the traditional date when the harvest begins in England. In 1946, Italian pastry maker Pietro Ferrero faced a severe cocoa shortage caused by World War II rationing. To stretch his limited chocolate supply, he blended it with ground hazelnuts, creating a paste called gianduia, which was later rebranded as Nutella. Today, the global confectionery conglomerate Ferrero buys approximately 25% of the entire world's hazelnut supply annually, effectively controlling the global market price. The chestnut differs from almost all other nuts because its composition is primarily starch rather than fat, giving it a nutritional profile similar to a potato. In the mountainous regions of southern Europe, particularly the French Massif Central, chestnut flour was the primary source of carbohydrates for communities living above the elevation line where wheat could not grow. This reliance earned the chestnut tree the nickname the bread tree. In 1904, a fungal pathogen called chestnut blight arrived in New York City via imported Asian nursery stock. Within 40 years, the fungus eradicated an estimated 4 billion American chestnut trees, fundamentally altering the ecology of the eastern United States forests. A tree that once made up 25% of the Appalachian canopy is now functionally extinct in its native habitat. The pine nut is not a culinary anomaly, but the actual seed of specific pine tree species, primarily the stone pine in Europe and the piñón pine in North America. Harvesting these seeds requires collecting mature pine cones and heating them so the scales open. a process that has remained unchanged since the Roman Empire, when soldiers carried pine nuts as Iron Age combat rations. In the American Southwest, Great Basin tribes harvested piñon nuts for over a millennium, utilizing the sticky pine resin as a waterproof sealant for baskets. A modern phenomenon known as pine mouth can occur 1 to 3 days after consuming seeds from the Chinese white pine species. This condition alters the consumer's taste buds, causing every food eaten over the subsequent 2 weeks to taste intensely bitter and metallic. There is no known cure. The macadamia, walnut, and pecan are often grouped with the kola nut, though the latter contains significant amounts of caffeine and theobromine. Native to the tropical rainforests of West Africa, the kola nut has been chewed as a stimulant for centuries and played a central role in religious ceremonies and bride price negotiations. In 1886, Atlanta pharmacist John Stith Pemberton combined extracts of the kola nut with coca leaves to create a patent medicine designed to cure headaches and morphine addiction. This concoction was later carbonated and sold as Coca-Cola. While the modern corporate recipe has transitioned to synthetic flavorings, the original global beverage empire was built entirely on the chemical properties of this West African seed. The logo remains more famous than the plant that inspired it. The ginkgo nut is the edible kernel of a tree that survived the extinction of the dinosaurs. Native to China, the ginkgo biloba is a living fossil, with individual trees capable of living for over 1,000 years. The nut develops inside a fleshy, orange-yellow fruit that drops to the ground in autumn, emitting a pungent odor of rancid butter caused by high concentrations of butyric acid. Buddhist monks cultivated the trees in monastery gardens for centuries, prizing the boiled or roasted kernels as an aid to digestion and a symbol of longevity. In traditional Chinese banquets, they are featured in the vegetarian dish known as Buddha's Delight. The nuts contain a neurotoxin called ginkgo toxin, which heat does not destroy. Consuming more than 10 raw or cooked seeds in a single day can induce severe seizures in adults and proved fatal to children during historical famines. The tiger nut is neither a nut nor an animal product, but the underground tuber of a sedge grass called Cyperus esculentus. Archaeologists have excavated baskets of withered tiger nuts from Egyptian tombs dating back to the pre-dynastic period around 4000 BC, indicating they were a vital source of fat and starch in the ancient Nile Valley. The Roman scholar Pliny the Elder documented their medicinal use as a remedy for mouth ulcers and digestive ailments. In the 8th century, Islamic rulers introduced the crop to the Iberian Peninsula, where the moist soil of Valencia proved ideal for cultivation. This agricultural migration led to the creation of horchata de chufa, a milky beverage made by soaking, grinding, and sweetening the tubers. It remains the original version of a drink that Spanish colonizers later replicated in the Americas using rice. The betel nut is the seed of the areca palm tree, native to the tropical Pacific and parts of East Africa. It has been used as a social stimulant for over 2,000 years, with the earliest written records appearing in Sanskrit medical texts from the 1st century CE. The nut is traditionally sliced, wrapped in a betel leaf coated with slaked lime, and chewed as a stimulant that induces mild euphoria and a warming sensation in the body. The chemical reaction between the leaf, lime, and nut turns the consumer's saliva a deep, staining crimson, which has coated the sidewalks of cities from Taipei to Mumbai for generations. In traditional cultures, offering a guest a betel nut was an essential gesture of hospitality and diplomatic protocol. Today, the World Health Organization classifies the nut as a known carcinogen, as its long-term use is directly linked to high rates of oral cancer.